our not only honorary member of our working party, but also a very active participant to our meetings. And for the other participants, I guess that you already read our last number of the newsletter, in which a profile of Professor Erhard Meyer-Galow is presented. And I will just tell several few things, and you can find more about him on this newsletter, and also you will discover him as a man deeply interested in ethics, not only in chemistry, but in a general sense. He had a background as a valuable chemist. He occupied important positions in the chemical industry in Germany. He was president of the German Chemical Society, and also president of the Humboldt Society for the last 3 years. Nowadays, or recently, he was elected as honorary consul of the Kingdom of Bhutan in Germany. His activity was related, as I guess also from his profile, not only in chemistry involved in chemical industry, but also in a continuous search for become part of an elite, I can say, of the chemists interested to apply ethical principles in their profession. So further, I will leave Hans Steisslinger, who in fact will lead this interview and will be the moderator for the further discussions. So Hans, please continue.
Thank you, Anka, and welcome everybody. And welcome especially Erhard. It's a pleasure to have you. And just to give you all a little bit of background how we are doing this, we talked a lot about the oath for chemists. We talked a lot about the involvement of chemists in different areas and the moral and ethical challenges that may arise. And we said, let's start with to make this very practical. Let's start with interviewing several people among ourselves, but also within the wider circles of academia and business about their views and their understanding of what ethics means for them. And we couldn't have a better start than today, having Erhard with a long-standing experience. So we have prepared, Erhard, we've prepared 4 questions for you. And you just, you are invited to comment from your rich experience. And after we are done with those 4 questions, we are opening the floor for others to chip in or maybe ask more questions or comment, whatever is suitable for you. Okay. So this is recorded, as you have heard, and of course we will not share the recording anywhere outside our circle. And let's kick it off. So Erhard, the question number 1 is something where I have heard you talk about. That's why we put it on the list here. What sparked your personal interest in ethics?
Well, thank you very much, Hans. I'm appreciating very much that we start this sequence of interviews on ethics, because I'm of the opinion that ethics and morality should be a process and not just an issue about which we talk sometimes with somebody. Ethics for me personally is an issue day by day in all perspectives. And well, what sparked my interest? I started chemistry, as you know. And if somebody would have told me that in 2022 I would talk about ethics and morality, I couldn't believe it, because I was a chemist. I worked in the lab. I worked in marketing. I was in the business for many, many years at different levels, at the end, on the top levels. So I learned ethics and morality during my job, being a marketing boss or sales rep and so on. And I watch the market, what other people are doing, how they behave, what they do, what chemists are doing. To give you two examples, how I had to learn about ethics. One example is one of my first companies was a company which is producing still now titanium dioxide, the pigment, the white pigment. And during these days, it was the 70s. In the production process, we produced a waste acid, sulfuric acid, a waste acid, by dissolving so-called titanium slag. And we shipped this waste acid with special ships to the Northern Sea, and then it was dumped into the sea. And I had no idea that that was immoral, or that was not following any ethics. It was normal, it was legally done. And the factory manager said, well, the fish is like that. They follow our ships. Yeah? So I said, okay, obviously this is the right thing to do it. So this was my first experience. Second experience was when I was in marketing. I found out that very often the competitors were talking about price fixing. Yeah? What price do you offer to which company, which customer? For me, during these days, it was the 70s, it was very normal that we did that. But it was not, it was immoral to do that. So I had to learn, on the one side, as a natural scientist, who studied 7 to 8 years in the university and then in the lab, what ethics, morality would mean in the business. Then it changed over the decades, and we got laws and regulations and all that. And I watched the companies, what they did, and to the CEOs and the directors, and I found out that immorality is still growing in the industry, obviously. And so ethics was, well, a companion for me to think about what I do and what my influence is when I'm on the top of a company. What can I do to prevent people doing immoral things in the business? And I remember one time in the past, a sales rep came to me and said, hey, boss, I earned 1 million Deutschmarks during these days because I didn't pay a provision to a customer, which was agreed upon. I said, well, that's not fair. I took a check of 1 million and was traveling to South Africa, to Johannesburg, and gave the 1 million back to the customer. And we published that in the company. And I said, well, my dear friends here in the company, our customers and we are together. We are one unity. So I learned more. I did it. I was surprised that so many people in the business don't follow ethic guidelines. Then we had the period when ethic guidelines were developed, seminars were done, people were trained in ethics, and we were sitting there, and our bosses told us ethic guidelines, ethics. We are an ethical company. Oh, great. We'll listen to that. And I looked the next day a little bit aside, and not everybody was following the guidelines. And I asked myself, what the hell is the reason? what the hell is the reason that in spite of these ethic guidelines and even great people, sometimes if they come under pressure, they don't do it. They do what is their advantage, their personal advantage, especially when the person is coming under pressure. So that was a process which sparked me in my interest of ethics.
Very good. Now you already touched upon the second question,
Yeah.
which encompasses the thought of when you think about yourself as a business leader, what enables ethical behavior in yourself and others? And you already commented on that, but maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I think it started to focus on ethics when I was looking to the newspapers about the Volkswagen scandal, where engineers were forced by the board most probably to manipulate the software for pollution control. And I said to myself, well, I'm a CEO, I was a CEO, what shall I tell the people? And that was the reason why I was writing my books. You know the books, Business Ethics 3.0, which is an ethics which is coming out of the understanding and experience of wholeness. Wholeness means inner and outer experience. And this was a kick. And but when the starting point was a crisis in my life, as usual when I talk to people, when did you start your inner growth? When it was the beginning of the 80s, when I lost my job because of different reasons. I didn't want to do what my boss said. And secondly, my first marriage was going to become divorced. So this happened during 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, I lost my base for what was the base of my life. Then I got the hint from my sister, who is a very famous yoga teacher, and said, you got to go to Graf Dürkheim in Todtmoos in the Black Forest. He's a great wise man, a philosopher, a Zen master, expert of C.G. Jung's death psychology, and Meister Eckhart's mystic. And this first teacher explained to me what I did wrong in the past, how I didn't follow my real base experience when I'm in business. So during these days, I started meditation. I started Zen meditation, which is now a process has been the process for the last, say, 40 years. And this was a start where I learned that you are going to change your attitude in the business if you do meditation. I changed everything. I changed my leadership style. I changed my own behavior. I cooperate with the people in a very different way. And by doing that and growing inside and acting according to my inner growth in the outside world, in the business world, this was a kickoff. I think the kickoff was my own crisis and the understanding that business ethics has something to do, if you're under pressure, with your own consciousness. And therefore, I highly appreciate that you talked about consciousness, Hans, with our friends during the last meeting where I could not attend. For me, it has a lot to do with consciousness. And that's what I describe in my books and all my lectures. So it's a process for the last years, kicked off by a crisis. And I watch the market just now. If people come under pressure, if they are in a crisis, they may continue to be immoral or they may change their attitude. So this depends how their person inside has grown in the past.
Thank you. So following up on that, if I summarize what you just said, basically you are recommending, I mean, I'm provoking now, you're recommending that everybody goes through a crisis. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't recommend anybody to have a crisis. If somebody is ill and has a severe disease, for instance, or kicked out of a job, you cannot tell them, well, great, you're now in a crisis, and now you have the great opportunity to wake up, to see the light in your life. You have to be very careful, but it's true. When I participated sessions, the so-called meditation meetings, where 100 people or more participated, we were not allowed to talk, of course, during the meetings. And after the meeting, I was very interested. When did you start? And why did you start meditation? And almost everybody was explaining his start with his own crisis, different crises, personal, private, business, existential crisis. So I learned by my studies of C.G. Jung, which I did for more than 10 years with a dear friend in Switzerland, that a human being is only going to change when he is coming under pressure in a very severe crisis. If not, you do what you're conditioned for, what you learned from your parents, your masters in the past. So a crisis is a chance, an opportunity, a unique opportunity. But if you're in a crisis, that is the second experience, you need a guide. You most probably cannot do it by yourself to grow. You need a guide. And maybe you need a community to grow together. We call that Sangha in the Buddhist teachings. Yeah. So therefore, from this understanding, I watch different two crises, my own crisis and two crises of a company and of other people. And as you may know, I took over a very large chemical company, Hüls AG, in this very severe situation with several hundreds of millions of losses. I had no idea how to do my job, but I told the employees and the people, this is a severe crisis to survive. So we are like a human being. And what I can do is to strengthen our immune system by different measures, what I have learned as a person. So I transfer that to a company. That's what I did. Yes, crisis. And of course, we have many crises just now, severe crisis in the society. Now we see war. We have a climate crisis, we have a currency crisis, we have an environmental crisis, and all that. So it's really depressing me that obviously we are in a kind of transformation of society where a lot of different crises are arising to make us understand that we cannot continue to live like we lived in the past. And this was my understanding why we are in that deep crisis just now. And I see my obligation to talk to people about that and try to tell individuals what I did, what I do, how I understand transformation, and they may follow. You have no chance if you tell a collective or a company what they should do. They listen, and if they are coming under pressure, they behave what they are conditioned for. But if you tell your story as a narrative, you have the chance that many people are following. And it was very successful how I did that, how I did my different leadership. And this was, of course, coming out of understanding of wholeness. You must not meditate. There are so many different ways and methods to let your inside grow, and not only the outside, which is coming out of the ego. Let your inside grow, which is coming out of yourself, the Jung self, definition of C.G. Jung. It's contemplation, it's meditation, it's hiking, it's dancing, it's love, it's religion. There are so many ways, and everybody may select to get on one track, to grow what you have lost as a kid when you were 3 years. You lost your wholeness. You have developed your ego, which is a must. But we have to get back to the reunification with ourselves. And in doing so, you behave different even in the business. Not because you have to, because you cannot do otherwise. You grow inside and you are following your own ethic guidelines and prevent immorality. I would not say that that's only always possible 100%, even as a business leader. So you're sometimes in a situation where there are so many influences in your decision that you have to make up your mind and get a decision done where you try to harm as less people as possible, and the nature and the environment and so on. So very often we have to make compromises, but at the end you have to live with your decision, and this must come out of your inner conviction of wholeness, of compassion with everything in our great world.
Erhard, I want to build on what you said about the multiple crises we are going through. You know, you named just a few, like war and climate and financial turmoil. Now, and you talked about the loss of wholeness as one of the key defining moments for people to misbehave. Now, can you elaborate from your business perspective, but also from your academic perspective, which are the driving forces for unethical behavior? Sometimes it's easier to pinpoint those things that we know are wrong, rather than not knowing what should be done. Yeah, that's an open, undefined, big question, but navigating around those, those areas where we know it's wrong, and how can we identify the driving forces for the unethical behavior?
According to my experience, the main driving force is anxiety. Anxiety of the individual, anxiety in the collective. Anxiety is a driving force for this unethical behavior. The opposite for me of anxiety is love. So if you are afraid, or if anxiety is growing, and it's growing in our society, is the driving force. If you look into the business, why are people changing their behavior because of their own advantages in the business? Anxiety to fail is the driving force. Out of anxiety to fail, there is developing greed. And greed is a consequence of anxiety. You are greedy because you want to earn more money, you want to get promoted, you want to keep your job, you don't want to get kicked out, you want to be awarded, you want to be the number one of the company or of the market. Because if you're so egocentric over decades in your business career, you're always afraid that sometimes in a situation you don't know what to do, or you don't know how to decide, or you may fail, anxiety to fail, or you may lose your job, or you may lose your money, or you may lose your private life, and therefore you're afraid of that. So anxiety is the driving force. Anxiety is coming out of the egocentric ego, which is afraid, which is addicted to all these behaviors. And the only way to get free is to get free of your ego mind. I'm not one of those people who say you have to get rid of your mind. I think that is not my understanding. It's wonderful to have a great ego. You have to develop your ego. Our society is full of people who have very little ego, and they are ill, they have psychic problems. You need to develop your ego. You may develop it until you're 40 or so, but then you have to get rid of the addiction to your ego. So to understand that ego is good, but egocentric is bad. Egoistic is bad. And by getting rid of this addiction, you will find out that your anxiety is going to be reduced and you behave very different. So anxiety, and if you look to even the war just now, or the climate crisis, or other crises, there's a lot of anxiety in the individuals who are responsible for this crisis. They're full of anxiety. Before he's killing me, I'm killing him because I'm afraid of him. So from my perspective, anxiety is a driving force. Hans.
Thank you. Thank you. Now this is now question number 4, but you all can chip in with other questions later. We committed ourselves in this group to not talk academically about moral behavior, and we want to make it practical, because we see this as both a responsibility and our contribution to make the world a better place. So Erhard, what's your advice, very concrete, applicable to us and others, how to make the shift towards ethical behavior practical?
Well, from my point of view and my own experience, it can be done or achieved on a very practical way. But before I explain that, I have to talk about consciousness. I don't have in mind what you talked about consciousness, Hans, last time in the meeting, but when I talk to people about consciousness, and people like that expression, consciousness, many people talk about consciousness, and I ask them, what do you mean? Normally, it's difficult to get an answer. For understanding what I mean, how to be more on the ethical track, which is based on the wholeness, I want to make you understand that we have 2 different definitions of consciousness. And I learned that from Eckhart Tolle. I don't know whether you know him. He's German. He's now in America for many, many decades. He's a very successful author, speaker, well respected, and he talks in very simple words and sentences, and I want to listen to him. And he was asked, what is consciousness, sometimes from one attendant of his seminars, and he said, it's very, very simple. You must distinguish between a so-called, I don't know whether it's the right translation, the so-called representational consciousness and the non-representational consciousness. Normally we are in a situation of representational consciousness. Hans, ich weiß jetzt nicht, ob ich das richtig übersetze, das gegenständliche Bewusstsein und das nicht gegenständliche Bewusstsein.
Ja, das passt schon.
Passt schon? Okay, so we agree that this is a good translation. Representational consciousness comes out of our ego. So we are conscious of what we say, what we do, what we see, our 5 senses, what we learned, how we should behave, and this is a table, and this is an apple, and this is my wife, and so this is all representational consciousness. We are limited normally in our day-to-day life to be guided by our representational consciousness, which we learn over decades. Otherwise, we could not survive. We need that. According to my experience, and I'm not alone, this is a very little space. There's a much larger space of the so-called non-representative consciousness. Carl Gustav Jung called that the collective unconscious. The quantum physicist, even at least Hans-Peter Dürr, when I talked about them, he said, well, this is the background level or the quantum field. It's empty, but from this field there is arising reality, because this field has potentiality to manifest as a reality. And my recent teacher, Thomas Campbell, he tells that a larger consciousness system. We are conscious, what we do, but there is a larger consciousness system outside our thinking, our doing, which is calling larger consciousness system, which you can contact, or where you can ask questions, you get answers. So this is much larger than your own individual consciousness. What is meditation doing? And all these ways of growing inside. If we stay on our outside level, we are staying on the representational consciousness level. If we give that up, and by going into a retreat or into stillness, if we give up our thinking, if we give up our words in coming from our brain, if we retire into a situation which is quiet, and we focus with all our mindfulness, and therefore we need our ego. We have to decide to be mindful. If we concentrate on our mindfulness as a first step of meditation, and then we give up all our mindfulness and we let it go. The letting go is the secret of growing inside. Just let everything go. Either you concentrate on nothing, or on a mantra, or a prayer, on a word. So, and then if doing so, you tap the unconsciousness, or the non-representational consciousness. And if we would now talk to Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, mathematics, physics, and so on, and ask them, where are your ideas coming from? Where is your intuition coming from? They tell you narratives and stories where the problem or the question was structured, but they didn't think about it. They gave up. It was just a situation, Werner Heisenberg, Helgoland, midnight, thunderstorm. And he gave everything up, and all of a sudden the basis of quantum physics was there. And I know many citations. So if we enter a way of being focused on the nothing, on the non-thinking, no feeling, and there are thousands of different ways, then we can experience the space of a non-representational consciousness. If we do that, we feel over a couple of time, over years, how we change. We change in our thinking, in our doing, as far as business is concerned, our leadership style. We change our behavior to other people. We are developing compassion, love and empathy for everything, for everybody. And then, and this is my credo, this beside all ethic guidelines, then if we are doing so and practice that, to experience it, then there's no need to understand what are the basics of ethics. That would be all ego mind. If we develop our guidelines or seminars and we promote that, it's all ego mind. And my credo is, let us talk about that, let us practice, let us develop our network, and make people understand that by changing their lives in all respective, by understanding what we can learn from our unconsciousness, then the listeners, hopefully, would I say, will do ethical and moral things in a situation where they come under pressure. And I know some people. If not, they will, of course, act different, but everybody has to make his own decision. And therefore, this is the reason why I highly appreciated to being member of your wonderful group, that for me, and I think I've sent you a quotation from Hans-Peter Dürr, that ethics should be an ever-acting process between us. And if we do that, ever-acting process of us, others are hearing that, others are feeling that, we influence others, we influence the community in chemistry, in the chemical business, and so on. They listen. Oh, there are some people who are quite thinking different of ethics and morality, It's not only guidelines, seminars, and we have not to force our employees to do that. They have very different view on ethics. Let's grow the unconscious in our company, for instance. Give people free, make them free. And this is a source for creativity. Intuition will grow, inspiration will grow, innovation will grow, because the people that they are not forced by a brainstorming to develop the ideas, they do it themselves. So they are not afraid anymore to fail. That's a great leadership where a company can be very innovative. If you as a leader, be the major part to prevent any form of anxiety. Let people make mistakes, support them. Let's try. If somebody has a good idea, okay, let's try. Of course, you have to limit maybe the disadvantages, but let's try. And so give them freedom that they lose anxiety, which I mentioned as the driving force before. And then they will be sometimes in the situation, their creativity will grow. And my experience in the Meyer-Galow Prize for Business Chemistry, as you know, for innovation, I asked many people, your great idea, where was it coming from? And 3 prize winners told me in the past, when I had showers, warm showers, I stopped thinking. And all of a sudden I had a great idea. So this is my message, where it comes from, a different behavior. And people will feel it, because you are different in all your discussions. Yes. And this discussion about, for instance, which we had about the Corona crisis, or now the war, or the climate crisis, this discussion with other people was done and pursued in a very aggressive way of egos. It is separating our society. I'm very much depressed about the separation in our society. We need to grow together. And if we are so separate, more and more, everybody is thinking about the ego, we are going to ruin ourselves. We are all losers. Maybe still we have a great opportunity.
So Erhard, this is wonderful. Erhard, can I just shortly interrupt you? This is wonderful. And I want to bring it back to some keywords that you said. You started off with a word which is, I think, at the center, which is wholeness. And if you would ask scientists what wholeness means, unless they are meditators, they would be at loss for words, because they don't know what you mean. So wholeness, the other word that you just ended with is separation. So turning people against each other, of course, is a means. We know that since the Romans, separate people and turn them against each other, and you can achieve whatever you want if you are strong, if you are a dictator. And we see that kind of behavior. So, I just want to summarize what you said on that note, and then want to invite everybody else to maybe chip in with own experience. And also, being natural scientists, I think that we need a fundamental reform of how we do science, because we do science in a very reductionist way. And reductionism is the result of leaving wholeness, not being connected to wholeness. So what results can we derive from not being whole and our thinking not connected to, the empty quantum field? That's something we might bring into another discussion. But so I just want to, remind us of what Erhard said about wholeness, about regaining wholeness, finding the entry points into this field of experiencing that I'm connected to myself and to others. It has to do with building communities, of course, which we can see every day that community is lost on a worldwide basis, because one part tries to gain advantage over another by using more weapons and deceiving the public and so forth. So this is all part of loss of wholeness. So thanks very much, Erhard, for for your deliberations, and the floor is now open. Whoever wants to, start with ideas that Erhard has put forward. What resonates? That would be my question to you. What resonates from what Erhard has said, and can you make it a little bit lively from your own life experience? So, please.
I have a question that resonated on the first question that you had and discussed. That is the anecdotes you told about your jobs. I believe they must be when around the 1980s.
Yeah.
And I guess something's changed. Some practices are no longer accepted, and that is in the awareness of the people. And I think many business and innovation practices change. Maybe since biotechnology and the big public outrage about it, things were different for nanotechnology already. And then slowly this discussion on normative aspects of innovation entered the scene. So, and recently there is this umbrella term, responsible research and innovation. And of course, I'm in that bubble academically, and I always say this is a great development. There are many things to be learned, many experiences to be made, but more and more it translates into actual methodologies in accompanying corporate innovation towards more sustainable practices. How would you see that whole field of responsible research and innovation? Do you see that having a viable effect also in the direction that you mentioned then, changing, so to say, the consciousness of the people? Does it induce a change in their attitude when planning and discussing innovations?
Well, Jan, when I listen to people who try to talk about this issue, it's very much brain and ego driven. Yeah, if you look into meetings in companies, and many people tell me about the meetings about how to achieve innovation, and the boss is arriving in the morning and said, "I know, you guys, I need to solve this problem. I need a new idea," and I come back at 5 p.m. and then I want to have the answer. Start your brainstorming now. And then he's leaving the door. Everybody is afraid and say, "Oh, what are we doing if we cannot follow his request and if we have no idea how to solve the problem?" So what do? They talk 5 hours and find excuses because why it's not possible what he's asking for to prevent any risks. At the end, everybody is only talking about the risk.
Hello.
In my experience in business and companies, around 15–16% are the people who are creative, who carry the flame of innovation. And I talk to the people. They are not afraid to fail. The rest is very much afraid. So as anxiety is growing in our society, double-digit growing, if you look to burnout, depression, use of pharmaceutical drugs and all that, you see that anxiety is growing. And if it's growing in the society, it's growing in the business, it's growing in science, in research, in yourself. So I'm very critical that we are on the right track and that we are achieving a better situation in the future. Nevertheless, I start every day to be positive on that, but just now we have many examples where what we like other people to do, maybe it will fail. But I want to add one very important issue, which I learned from Hans-Peter Dürr, the quantum physicist. He said, people have to understand the whole evolution has developed by cooperation. Darwin is wrong when he said survival of the fittest is the rule. It's not. He was so convinced that if you look deeply with experience into evolution of many different disciplines in science, in everything, you will find out it's achieved evolution, being in a better situation, further developed animals and so on, if cooperation is developing. It's not to fight against others. And this is a key point, how to change the situation just now, which you said, Jan. Cooperation science, for instance. We are scientists. Cooperation in all areas. This is a base. If you want to cooperate, you behave different. If you want to fight each other, you're on the ego level. If you cooperate, you're on the level of the self.
Right. Thank you. Alistair, you have raised your hand.
Thank you. That was very interesting. About I had a serious crisis about 20 years ago, and I don't want to talk about the details of it, but you emerge from something like that over a period of years, and you realize that relationships are the defining feature of your life, and they are the most important things. So I suppose really, for me, some things that we need to avoid is the divide and conquer.
Yeah.
How one does that is difficult because of this treadmill that you're talking about, and we're all so aware of. And I was interested in what you were saying about where ideas come from. And quite often, many of the ideas that came to me was when I was out running. I used to do a lot of distance running, and your mind just sort of relaxes. It is a sort of form of meditation. Many people who don't run don't believe that, but it sort of comes because your thoughts are sort of free-flowing. I don't have any concrete ideas, but one of the things that you were saying that resonated with me is almost, we're talking about what succeeds, where people get their ideas and how. Getting everybody to meditate, might be a tall order. But I wondered if we need to talk a little bit more about those things that we did that we felt were wrong, and how that influenced us, and how that's brought about some change. So if you can avoid some of those things, isn't that going to make you feel a lot better? But I mean, it's difficult to be prescriptive sort of on this. So I shall go away from this conversation and listening to you, thinking about it probably for weeks now. So I haven't got anything much more constructive to add, but just thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
If I may, I'd like to build on what Alistair just said. I don't know whether you know the name. There was a quite famous artist in Germany. His name is Joseph Beuys. The Germans know him. He was highly controversial. He was born in 1921, and I think he passed away in 1986 or 7. So he did lots of installations, and he wanted to provoke discussions among the auditors and the onlookers of his art, and he succeeded in that one. But it really struck me when he was an artist in the social sphere. That's how he called himself. And there's one quote which is very famous about him, and there is also an installation which has that title, and it's called "Show Me Your Wound." So if we are, and that's what Alistair just said, if we have enough guts and courage to talk about where we have been wounded in our lives, this is a huge invitation for others, not just to listen and be nosy, no, but to open up themselves. And suddenly we are in a new social sphere together. We can look at what went wrong and why did it go wrong and what can we learn from it? So that's a community building feature in itself. And Joseph Beuys, to my knowledge, was one of the proponents to talk about that, you know, very, very openly. And not everybody liked him for that. Why? Because after World War II, most people were traumatized. And they are traumatized up to this day. And we now know that we are inheriting traumas from our parents and grandparents and so forth. So, you know, anxiety that Erhard was talking about is something we all know about, you know, anxiety to fail, proving that we are the greatest and, you know, show off, you name it. So I just wanted to mention that in the end, we, as again, a quote from Beuys, we are artists in the social sphere. You know, every one of us is structuring relationships, and we can structure them in a positive way. So everybody not just feels good, but gets something creative out of it. And we can structure them exactly in the opposite way, where, you know, mischief is created and we are everybody's foes and so forth. So thanks, Alistair, for that comment about showing weakness and showing pain and building together a social sphere.
I highly appreciate your remarks about the social influence and the acting and reacting of individuals. And I like to tell narratives, because it's my narratives, others' narratives. We learn what we can do, and maybe others are listening. And Hans-Peter Dürr told me he never started any meditation. He was so peaceful. He was so full of compassion. And during these days, I was on the track to tell everybody that he should meditate, of course. So I had to learn my lesson, coming away from all the lecturing, Alistair, to my own narrative. And Hans-Peter, I never meditated. I said, what did you do? And Hans-Peter said, I prefer the loving dialogue. Yeah? A dialogue with another person. Then you can talk about your wounds, what you said. You can talk about your experience. Don't overvalue all that. You listen to the others. You can relax. You can be quiet. Give the other one a chance to talk about his wounds, his experience, his ideas for the future. And with another party, I play a duet, he said. And then another is coming in, and we are three. We play a trio or a quartet. And this is my meditation. I said, yeah, and he said, this has one advantage over meditation, what I do, the loving dialogue. It has as a source of developing ideas, be creative, spontaneity, which you don't have if you meditate in your meditation room, where you are alone. Maybe you're never alone, of course, even if you're meditating with 100 people and everybody's quiet. But so, and this reminds me what we can learn out of our discussion just now, when my teacher for deaf psychology, Walter Schwerig, to make me understand how meditation really is and what it has to do, when it was in a retreat in the Toscana with the Tibetan Lama, and 120 people were meditating here in a big room. And then he came out of his office and saw 120 people meditating, and they were really hard-working meditation. Yeah, they're mindfulness. They were working to be mindful, that the master's happy what they did. And then he looked at them and said, don't meditate, just relax. And everybody was laughing, and everybody was in the middle for the inner growth. They were relaxed. So this is the secret. It doesn't make any sense to tell other people what they have to do. I was many years on the track to tell everybody what they have to do about meditation and all that, because I got the experience. Everybody's different. Everybody has his own experience. But what I tell people, and you may have heard that from me in my lectures, if less people understand what I mean, especially young people, I said, when you die, you make this experience of being enlightened, maybe. That's what we learned from near-death experience. When you are in the process of dying, I cry into the crowd, don't wait until you die. Nobody's laughing, but I have the whole attention. We do it now. And what we do here in this group, we do it now. We talk about that. This discussion is showing me that we are such a great group of people. And I would appreciate that many, many people around the world would listen what we are telling here to us, not to others, not to tell them what they do in ethics. Everybody is telling his own narrative, Alistair and Hans and Jan. We are talking about our narrative, how we develop. And there's, of course, a reason why I'm a member of this working group. We learned our lesson for ourselves. And if we tell how we achieve that understanding of ethics, others have the opportunity to learn, not to copy it, to be on their own track. And they do, and some don't do that. And therefore, I'm happy to be part of this group. It's not forcing others. It's influencing others without talking.
Yeah.
By our social behavior. Yeah. And everybody, if you're a leader of a company, the whole company, they're watching to you. Yeah. And when I had my first meeting with many thousands of employees at Hüls, and I had no idea how to change the company, I just said, we are in a deep crisis. We are here with our bare feet on a hot plate. This was a message. This was talking about wounds, Hans. Yeah, we got hot, wounded feet, and maybe we die. And normally I could have stopped my speech. I talked another half an hour, what I mean, but to tell that, talk about the wounds, and then we changed the whole system. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Erhard. And maybe somebody else wants to comment? Anka.
Yes.
Your microphone, please.
Okay, so I would like to raise a problem. In fact, what do you think, Erhard? Which is the level of education at which each of us is capable to go inside itself and to try to grow the own consciousness, and to be able to make the distinction between good and bad, between an ethical behavior and an unethical behavior. Because in fact, all of us, and you also recognize somehow this, all of us are the product of, and our behavior, in fact, of the family in which we were grown, the education we received, and more and very important, the people we met along our lives.
Yeah.
And how we could distinguish between these people which have a good behavior and which have not a good behavior. Because in fact, yes, after a while or at a certain age, we are able to make such a change in our behavior, because we already arrived at a level of life, of good life, let's say, maybe, at a level at which we can understand the good things happening around us and in the society.
Yeah.
But until there, we have to have an education in this sense, because other way, I guess it's not possible or very difficult to have such a transformation. And which do you think that are the problems at the young age, which the people really face, because they face these problems in a at least in the society in which we are living now, which is led mainly by business, making money, and less by the consciousness, which can lead to a better life for all the people, in fact. And people are most tempted to see the next day for their lives and not a future for the whole society, even for themselves.
Yeah. Thank you, Anka. Erhard, you want to comment?
Yeah. Of course, there's no rule what the right age is to open yourself to this understanding of consciousness. Normally, a couple of years ago, I would have answered this question by saying, well, wait until your midlife crisis when you're 45. And if you have a midlife crisis, don't understand the sense of your life anymore, now that you have the opportunity to change. This was happening many, many years or decades or so. If I look to the today's situation, everything has changed. I meet so many, Anka, I meet so many young people who tell me, I don't want to live like you lived. Yeah? I don't want to be with the same life pattern that your generation. I want to do completely, everything is different. I don't want to make a career in business. I'm not going for a lot of money. I want to participate in anything which makes sense for me personally and for the whole world. So this is the positive side of this transformation period with all the crises. We should not look only to the bad side of the crisis. We should look to the good side of the crisis. It's combined together, the good and the bad, in us, in the society, in the collective. It's always together. I'm very optimistic that in the, let's say, in the Western world, in the industrialized countries, the young generation are telling us older people that they want to live different, with different rules, with different patterns, with different, I wouldn't say work-life balance, I would say life balance, all perspective of life, and they do it. So if you ask me what is the right age, now I would say the right age maybe is 25 or 30. And if they don't learn the lesson, they behave like we behaved in the past. But maybe this is not the pattern for success for their personal life in the future. When I started after the study of chemistry in 1969, with my colleagues, everybody wanted to make a career and be in the board of directors. Everybody. If you ask people now, I wouldn't say nobody, but yeah. I talk to young people when they have the proposal to be promoted in the company. I said, oh, I don't want that, boss. I don't want to be responsible for 10, 50, 100 people. Let me do what I do here as an individual. I'm happy with that. I want to leave for my family of, I don't know for what, for kiting or surfing or music or dancing at 5 o'clock after office hours. It's completely different. So we, as the working group ethic, can be an example how people, when they're getting older like we are, may be a role model for the young generation. If we say, well, we want to change, is it in the same direction like you did it, like you wanted, by cooperation, by understanding, by dialogue, by different values. We could talk about values. And of course, you mentioned that I'm now honorary consul of Bhutan, where happiness is a big issue. And everybody is then telling me, oh, great, we heard in Bhutan they are living the most happiest people. I said, no, nobody thought that. Happiness is in Article 9(2) part of the Constitution. And at the last situation in 2010, 41% were only happy. And 5 years later, 43. But the king and the government in Bhutan made happiness an important issue of their life, in the government, in everything. And they asked the people, what do we have to do to make you happy? And if we look to that, I have always to explain to people in the West what they mean with happiness. It's not our happiness of the West. It's not fulfilling the desires in the outside world. It's coming from inside. It's more bliss, maybe. It's more contentment, or it's more ananda. Yeah, it's coming from inside. And this is the aim and the big desire of the young generation, Anka. They have, I feel there is a real great desire in our society for, yeah, how to say it, Geborgenheit, Hans, wie sagt man das? Geborgenheit.
Oh, don't know.
For being supported.
Being supported, being covered by others, being held by others within your community.
Yeah, there's a great desire because of all the problems. And some people die without understanding what we have talked here. So we have to understand that, and I learned that by learning C.G. Jung's experience. The religion in the past has started to tell the people what ethics is, and they failed. Yeah? The religion, or at least the Christian religion, is in a dead end street. Their mistake was they said you have to be good. They told hundreds of years of people you have to be good, and I tell you how to do that. And if you are not good, I tell you how to do that. So this was a big mistake in thinking and behavior. You have to be good. We are not good 100%. We are good and bad. It depends on the situation, on our people, family, blah, blah, blah. We are good and bad. So the question is how to keep that in balance. How our good side feels when our devil, our bad side, is showing up. Yep. And then we have to say, hey, I'm the boss here. I'm the guy. I don't do that because I see the harm to the society if I would do that. This is a better understanding. So therefore, my books are based on Erich Neumann's little book, Ethics, Death Psychology and a New Ethic. This new ethic, which he described, is based on the experience that we are good and bad, and that the bad has to be integrated in the good. And this is another wholeness. Yeah? This is another wholeness.
Exactly. Let's Erhard, let's talk. Let's give Maria the opportunity to ask her question.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Meyer, for your very interesting talk and for the examples given.
Yeah.
And I have a question to the first example you gave us about this company which produced this titanium dioxide, the white pigment, and they dumped the acid wastes in the sea. And my question is, how did you change this situation and how your ethics behavior help you? Because in my opinion, by these big environmental problems, you need the support and the cooperation for many people and also for the population to change this. We have here in Greece a similar problem with our red mud wastes. You know, red mud comes from the bauxite treatment to produce alumina. And in the previous years, they dumped the very alkaline red mud, which is about 750,000 tons per year, in the Corinthian Gulf, in the sea. But the population protested very hard, and also they see some alteration in the environment of the sea for the fish and so on, and they are obliged to change this. That means that for these big problems, cooperation and support from many people is necessary. Not one people can change this. This is my opinion, and as you told us, it is very important to learn this in the university or during the education.
Yeah, I know this problem of the waste mud of the bauxite industry, of course. You cannot do it anymore today. Because why? We learned a lot how it is harming the environment. We learned it how, maybe in previous years we did not learn that. The competitors were doing the same. If we would not do the same and save costs, drive the costs down, but just dump it and not to look for different ways, we would have been out of the marketplace. This is a very big issue. You can change it if you're the CEO, of course. You said, I don't do that anymore. We follow other patterns. The waste asset is now recycled, because it's not anymore allowed, and we agreed to that. It was not my decision. My colleagues decided that it's no need anymore to dump the waste asset in the North Sea because it's recycled. It's more expensive.
We try also the same with the
mud. If you look for different ways what to do with the mud, we have a very similar example when we were producing sulfuric acid by roasting pyrites, and the iron oxide, the cinder, is a residue. We dumped it as well, but we piled it up, and it's not anymore acceptable. And I would like to mention here what is often in these environmental discussions, even just now, or the discussion about gas restrictions now, or energy restrictions, or what we should do. If we understand that these methods are not anymore acceptable, most probably they are the cheapest, they're the methods with the lowest costs, because therefore people are doing them. So we have to understand, if we are more ecological, it's going to be more costly. It costs more money, you see. If we are changing processes from any other coal, oil, maybe to hydrogen, to green power hydrogen, it's not cheaper, it costs more. Sometimes it costs double or 3 times. So the way to be more ethical in chemical production costs more money, higher costs. Maybe it may result if you lose your competitiveness. If others, I don't know, somewhere in the world are doing the same, it costs more. If you, as a country, as an individual, as a company, as an individual, if you want to change your attitude and say, we are whole, nature and we are just one, I don't do it, I change it, it costs more money, it costs more time, it costs more engagement, it costs more understanding, it costs more talks, you have to convince other people, but it has to be done, and it will change the whole society. And we are in that process. Is it still a problem in your country?
No. Now they change the way, and they bring the whole waste is in depots.
Okay.
Don't know.
There was an accident in Brazil, as you know.
I was an accident, I think, in Hungary.
Okay.
In Hungary, very big.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Erhard. Anka, do you want to take over? Thanks to all. Thanks to Erhard.
Yes. Okay.
And Anka will now talk about the remaining open topics.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Erhard, for the interesting meeting today. And we turn a little bit, maybe 5 minutes, to the next topic, the conference in Lisbon. We, as far as the members announced until now, maybe we will be 6 participants at the place. We will see how we can arrange. I don't know if we can change the meeting on organized by the organizers on 30th of August to 2nd of September, if this is possible, to be able, all of us, even those which intend to pay only one day, as Franco